With pallet runners, it's basically deep lane storage systems. They deliver the pallets via a cart. When you're using this system, the pallets are loaded in the system by a lift truck, which then transports and places the pallet onto the pallet cart. The pallet cart will then take your pallet and load it into the system. It's the same with retrieval as well. You will send the pallet will go retrieve the pallet, bring it out of the system to the front in your home position, and that's where your driver will be able to receive and take the pallet delivered to the truck or wherever he needs to go with it. Some things to discuss about that is when you are removing pallets from the system, the operator is the one who tells the pallet to go retrieve it, bring it to the front, and he's got a couple of options. One of them is going to be a continuous out option. Basically what he does is he can select continuous out. The pallet runner will go retrieve the first pallet in the system, bring it to the front. The driver can collect that pallet, and then while he's taking that pallet to the truck, the pallet runner will go and receive the next pallet in the system and bring it to the front. It will continue this process until the entire row is emptied. Another option for your driver is going to be a controlled retrieval. One of the nice things about this is what the driver can do is he can select the number of pallets he would like to remove from the lane, and the system will go and get those pallets one after another. One of the things this is a benefit for, though, is because the driver doesn't have to do any thinking. So he won't overload the truck. It won't go get additional pallets because he sets the number at the start. And then the last thing that it does is there is an inventory count option where the pallet will travel underneath the pallets. It'll count the boards, and every gap will realize that it's a pallet space, and it'll give you a count of the number of pallets remaining in the lane. And then one of the big things to notice here in this picture is you'll notice that these lanes are very narrow, the size of the pallet. The pallet runner kind of eliminates the need for a driver to enter the actual lane, which means that you really get to utilize the max amount of your warehouse volume, both vertical as well as horizontal in that aspect. One thing to note is these are fully automated. Pallet runner is an option. What they'll do is they will connect here. You'll see in the circle there's a Wi-Fi device. They connect to the front of the pallet runner. And this Wi-Fi allows it to communicate and interact with systems such as AGVs. And it's a pretty big benefit because a lot of those larger distribution warehouses, what they'll do is they'll use this kind of system interacting with their AGV. It removes that human component, which actually gives you quite a bit of options. One, I've seen companies end up turning off the lights. You don't have to worry about heating and cooling because it is all automated machines in there. There is no human component when you go full auto. Some ideal operations for the pallet runner system. The first is going to be if you have a high number of pallets of the same SKU. Obviously all the same lane product. It's very accessible. You can't access the middle of the lanes, but you can store a lot of the same SKU at a very deep amount for high density. It's also used a lot when you are staging loads. So in the front, you may have a night crew that wants to stage their loads for the day crew. So you can assign, let's say, a FedEx for one lane, UPS for one lane, yellow YRC for one lane, and they'll build the load in that lane. And then when they go to load that truck in the morning, all they have to do is empty that lane, fill the truck, and the load's on there. There's no thinking, no way to get the loads confused. So it is very good for staging as well. And we see this quite a bit in the beverage industry. That's really one of the big areas we see this utilized for staging. Next is going to be a low number of SKUs. This is because usually you will dedicate one lane to a SKU. So if you do have a high number of SKUs, you are going to need more lanes. That being said, if you do have a high number of SKUs, it is possible to do it. I have seen systems that are 115 lanes wide, and they've got 15 SKUs. They'll dedicate 4 lanes here, 6 lanes there. It is possible. It is just a good thing to keep in mind. The more SKUs, the more lanes you'll need. And then required specialized pallets for configuration. So one of the things for the system is the pallets are all moved gently. It's customizable. They can make these carts to fit your pallet size, and the pallets are moved gently through the system, so you really don't have to worry about a special configuration. That being said, obviously there are some limitations with that. They can do double wide systems, but there are some complications that come into factor with it, so it is really something to think about. You're going to want to discuss that before you kind of move forward. And then lastly is going to be the fast throughput. So anywhere where efficiency, time is important, this is a great system. As I mentioned, the lift driver doesn't drive into the system in any way. The pallet does all the legwork, brings all the pallets to the front of the system, so all your operator needs to do is take the pallet from the front of the system, the home position, and load it onto the truck or to whatever area he needs to take it to in the warehouse. Along with that, is this system does allow for multiple drivers to work within the same system. So again, efficiency, faster throughput, it's definitely going to help with that. And then lastly, one thing to remember is that you do need to maintain a good quality pallet to use this system. Usually what we recommend is a grade A or a grade B refurbished pallet. The system does travel underneath your pallets, so any kind of sag will cause interference with the pallet runner. And so we always try to, like I said, you don't want to use any cardboard pallets, any pressboard pallets. One thing to stay away from is if you do have quite a bit of pallets that are all different sizes or custom sizes, it's going to be one thing that will cause a lot of complications for the system as well. So any pallets that have that sag in there, you want to try to avoid that. So we're going to first start with some of the advantages for Pallet Runner over the drive-in rack system. It should be noted here that, Pallet Runner, it's a great option. It's got a lot of advantages to it, but it's only true if it fits your operation. There are situations in which, some rack systems will have advantages over the Pallet Runner system. But that's really where you're going to want to talk to one of those material handling integrators. They're going to be able to help assess some of your needs, kind of find out if it is going to be a good fit for your company or not. So a couple of things. One of the largest things that the Pallet Runner has over the drive-in system is going to be a reduction in rack damage. Reduces the rack damage. This is because, as I mentioned, the Pallet Runner is doing all the legwork. It's going and retrieving the pallet out of the system, bringing it to the front home position. Your driver isn't entering or driving into the system, whereas with drive-in, he's going into the system. There's a lot more chance for impact points, damage to either the system or the product while he's in there. So the Pallet Runner brings it right to the front. The really only threat to damage in this kind of system is where they're loading and unloading the pallet in the front, which is easily accessible, makes repairs a lot easier. Again, like I mentioned, when you're dealing with the drive-in, the deeper you go, the more problems you can have. And when you do have damage within the system, it's very hard to reach to repair. It's very hard to access that. And that damage can actually spread in those systems and cause failure. One of the things to note is drive-in rack is one of the most unsafe systems. As I mentioned, that damage in there, all those impact points that are possible can really cause a lot of problems, cause a lot of those systems to fail, which is a danger to your driver. With the Pallet Runner, pallet's the only thing going into the system. It'll enter the system, no problem. There's no safety issues for it, as well as depth of the system. So when you're looking at how deep your system is, yes, we can make a drive-in rack pretty much as deep as you'd like, but the deeper you go, as I mentioned, the farther your driver will have to enter the system, more likelihood of damage, and obviously the deeper that damage happens, the much harder it is to get in there and repair that. Pallet runners, they can pretty much go as deep as you need. I believe the largest Pallet Runner system out there right now goes about 83 pallet positions deep. So the depth isn't an issue, and it's all the machine doing the legwork. Your driver doesn't have to enter the system. As well as the last thing to think about when you are going into a deeper and deeper system is when the driver enters that system, he's got to go retrieve the product, bring it out. That's a lot of extra drive time, a lot of additional time for him during the process. So when the Pallet Runner is doing all that, the driver picks the pallet, he can go load it on the truck, and the Pallet Runner will be going and grabbing the next pallet at the same time that driver is going and putting it on the truck. Really helps to make it more efficient, give you that faster turnaround. And then one last thing to understand here is when you are dealing with the pallet runner system, it has a lot less honeycombing than when dealing with a drive-in rack system. There still is some honeycombing, obviously, with the pallet runner system, but it prevents a lot because the lanes are all independently accessible. So when you're a drive-in system, depending on what product is below or above what you're trying to access, you may have to move additional pallets to reach the pallet you're accessing. In this one, all the lanes are independently accessible, so the pallet runner can go, grab the next pallet, bring it to the front. You don't have to worry about product above or below. Next would be some commonly seen advantages over a pushback racking system. The first thing that comes to mind is going to be that you don't need a specialized lift truck for it. Obviously, with a pushback system, if the heavier weight, the more you're pushing back, you do need a stronger truck. So if you're pushing back, 10,000 pounds of product, but you've only got a 4,000-pound lift truck, obviously there's going to be an issue there. With the pallet runner system, the pallet is doing all the work for you, and it's doing all the heavy lifting, and it's only bringing one pallet at a time. So as long as your lift truck can lift the pallet that you're dealing with, there's no issue. There's no need for a higher truck, or there's no need for a specialized truck. And then another big advantage of it is that with pushback, you're only dealing with a LIFO system. So last in, first out. But when you deal with the pallet runner, you can actually set it up in multiple ways, where you could do a LIFO system, you can do a FIFO system, and then there's actually a couple other benefits that are offered. One of them is going to be they do offer a bidirectional option, which means that you can actually switch where the home position is. So I'm going to go back to a previous slide here just so you can see what I'm talking about. But in this slide here, you can see the pallet is sitting at the front of the rack, and that's the home position. Now, what you can do on a bidirectional system is you can switch that. That pallet will move all the way to the other end of that lane, and it'll start using that as the home position. So when they're unloading from the other side, they don't have to bring the pallet around themselves, and they can just switch the way, basically give you that FIFO option by switching which end is the home spot for the pallet runner. And lastly, one of the things they offer is what they call a split lane. So they can do an option where if this is 30 pallets deep, they could have the first 26 pallets positions of that lane being a LIFO, and then the last 4 they can set up as a FIFO. You're going to really see this in kind of food companies where there's expiration dates, really where they're going to be monitoring it a little more, and they can't have stagnant products sitting in there. All right. Our next slide here is going to be some of the advantage over a pallet flow rack system. Really, one of the things here is that the pallet flow system all works on a pitch. So the more pitch you have, the more vertical space will be taken up for that pitch for your product, and that's where you're going to lose vertical space for storage, especially with lighter products. With the lighter product, you're going to need a higher pitch, which means you are losing more and more vertical space. Along with that, the pallet runner doesn't run into that option. The lanes are all just straight lanes. There's no pitch required, so you don't lose that vertical space. Now, a pallet flow rack it'll be better for 8 and under a lot of times. If there's 8 pallet positions deep or less, it's really probably going to be a better option. But when you do start dealing with lighter pallets, as I mentioned, like a 400-pound pallet, 600-pound pallet, that's where you'll see the advantages for a pallet runner system. Those lighter pallets, they need that higher pitch. You can almost lose, an entire level of pallet storage if you're not careful. So pallet runner can really be a benefit on those smaller systems when you are dealing with the lighter pallets.